Well, thank you everybody for joining this conversation for lunch break with Red Team. And today we're very excited to spend a bit of time with our partners at LEVELSET. We've got an integration with these guys, and we'll touch into a lot of the work they've done on the industry and all the partnership that we've done and what that looks like for Red Team users as well as for LEVELSET users. But obviously, I'd be remiss if I didn't use this moment to share a little bit about Red Team. Red Team is a collaboration platform for commercial contractors, primarily general contractors. Hence, the importance of lean management. The GC tends to worry about delivering projects on time, on budget, and with a clean title is always preferred. So Red Team was born out of construction. So the way we think about our role in the construction industry is to help contractors sleep better at night. And this is why the partnership with LEVELSET made a ton of sense for us very early on. Definitely best in class solution. And so we really want to make sure to bring that to the market and to our users. The Red Team platform is a very broad platform, everything from business dev, pre-construction, to project management with Gantt scheduling. We have mobile applications for the field, also for your subcontractors to do all their billing. Again, ties back to the lean management. All those leans are just everywhere. Construction financials, of course, and all the closeout. So it's a very comprehensive platform. Happy to spend more time with each of you guys to talk more about what the platform could mean for your business. Red Team has an ecosystem of partners, companies like Autodesk, BIM 360, DocuSign, HH2, who we have a connector to both Sage 100 and Sage 300. Of course, LEVELSET, PlanGrid, QuickBooks Online, and TeamPlayer is actually a Red Team product which is designed for collaboration with your subcontractors. So straight up ecosystem designed to make your life easier. As far as the LEVELSET integration functionality with Red Team, the idea is that within Red Team, you can actually send your notices directly from inside of Red Team. So you have to log out of the software. It's all dynamic within the software. The vendors can sign. You can sign requests to waivers, and everybody's kept on the same page, right? Everybody's at the same time, knows all the information in real time, and all of that happens electronically. So the data is fully tracked. It's not like all of a sudden you're going into a Word document and sending an email separately, and then you have to keep a log somewhere of send that email on that date, and I know they received it, and all that kind of stuff. All of that happens within the two systems collaborating basically to provide you a seamless effort in terms of managing that entire process. Now, inside of Red Team, the software itself, we do track all the lien law claims at a project level. All the different tiers, if it's sub-tier and so forth. So you can document all of that so you know what liens you need to track. And as you go into your invoicing process, right, the lien waivers are displayed, so they need to be reviewed. If the integration with LEVELSET is active, you actually have a LEVELSET button that would show right here, and you can actually do the request for the waivers directly from within the vendor invoice management. So all of that is totally dynamic in the platform. But rather than talk about Red Team, which is not today's conversation is really to talk about payment in construction. LEVELSET has done a really large amount of work in not just saying, hey, our software does cool stuff. They really looked into understanding how the construction works, what happens, who pays on time, what are factors that could create predictability around, am I likely to get paid on time or not? What are behaviors and things like that? So I'm going to turn it over to Alex. Alex, I'll let you screen share. Let me stop my screen share here. So this way you can actually go into sharing what you guys did, the work you did, and because I think you've made a fair amount of noise in the industry. I mean, I thought it was really neat, or in a way I'd say, ballsy, to go, hey, those are the GCs that pay on time, and these are the ones that don't pay on time. So it was a really interesting effort, I think, that was made in terms of providing robust information to the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having us here. We love talking about payments, and that was a really good preface for kind of what we're all about, Frederick. So I really appreciate that. My role at LEVELSET, I don't have an intro slide for myself, of course, but I run the content team at LEVELSET. And what we really do every day is try and help people manage payments at every tier of the payment chain, from the owners to the general contractors, to the subs, to the sub-subs, to the suppliers and equipment lessors. Pretty much everyone has this, huge set of difficulties with payment, with the paperwork that comes with it, with the communication and collaboration that comes with it. And what we do on the content team is try and pull in data from around the ecosystem, whether it's through our app or buying data from people who are partnering with great companies, or doing these surveys that we're going to go over today. We try and really understand what is the root of these problems so that we can go and solve it, so that we can write really good content around how to solve these problems, and try and evolve our point of view on construction payments to make the whole payment world go a little bit smoother. So broadly, LEVELSET, I was just explaining, we manage construction payments and the related paperwork that can be extremely stressful. There's a ton of red tape. There's a ton of differentiation between different roles on the party, different states where you're doing work. It gets really confusing. So we really want to remove that stress of managing the paperwork, and we do that through our SaaS platform that integrates with Red Team. We have tons and tons of free resources on LEVELSET. We have an expert center where people can come and ask their payment questions, and lawyers will answer. Lawyers in their state will come and answer their question for them and give them, basically free legal advice. We also have contractor profiles that shows basically the payment score based off of all the data we're pulling into our ecosystem that, lets people know, like, how risky is it to work with someone? How easy is it to work with someone? And we really try and elevate the people that are doing a good job. When people are managing their payments in a good way in their contractor profile, they're going to start winning awards and badges through our badge program. And it's all there to promote that collaboration and visibility and transparency in the industry. This is just a fun diagram we like to use. Managing payment is really hard. You can see this is a relatively simple construction project where there's an owner and a general contractor. And the general contractor is really the crux of how the payment needs to flow to all the different parties, and the amount of paperwork, waivers, notices, different paperwork that is rolling through this project is really complex. And there's a lack of visibility. It's hard to know when you're a subcontractor who hires a few, or a general contractor hiring a few subs. It's hard for you to see all the people on the job all the time. And really what we want to do is create more visibility and really get rid of the fires that can happen when there isn't visibility and there aren't good payment practices going on. So like I said, we help people all along the construction payment chain, which is what we call that little diagram on the left, the chain of how things flow. We help the top tier parties avoid those payment fires, and we help the sub tier parties get paid faster. And we think a lot of that revolves around that communication and collaboration. So now that I've given set the stage here, we can jump into our findings of the report. 3 or 4 times a year, we sit down and we come up with a survey. Sometimes we partner with different brands like T-Sheets by QuickBooks or FieldWire to kind of expand our audience and get a really different look at different groups of contractors. This one we just did got a little over 600 respondents in the construction industry, and I'll break down the firmographics here in a second. But it's really companies of all sizes, all trades, all different people on that construction payment chain. And the goal for us is to publish a really useful and helpful report, or a number of reports that really uncover the state of the construction industry. Cool. So this is the past one we did. This is not the one that we're going to talk about today, but just findings to again set the stage a little bit more. This was the one we did in the springtime, right before coronavirus came. So even before coronavirus, we were having 80% of administrators spending a substantial amount of their time chasing payments. We had an average payment time of 83 days. And it's kind of out of your control in a lot of cases, whether you're a sub or a GC. We try and think about all the perspectives here. So when you're a general contractor, you are, having trouble getting your subs to submit the correct documentation or get those waivers in on time. And for subs, they're chasing payment and trying to figure out how to communicate with GCs. And unless there's that communication and collaboration and those strict processes that both sides need to follow, there's going to be a payment problem. So we really want to help people understand what are good processes they can implement as a GC to help subs do a better job requesting payment, and what can subs do to let GCs know they're on the job and that they're willing to follow those processes in order to get paid on time. So That's, an older report. You're welcome to go over to LevelSet. There's a little link there at the bottom of this bit.ly/pay report. And you can download some of our older reports. The new report that we're going to go over today is just breaking down some of the firmographics isn't ready yet. It should be going live sometime this month. And we'll make sure to let the audience know in one way or another. But this is, pretty much just a simple breakdown of the respondents. It's a very good mix. Mostly smaller companies, about 75% of the respondents were under 50 full-time employees. We see a lot of businesses located in the primary states, California, Florida, Texas. This is really common. There's a ton of construction projects in those states, more so than any other states. So we almost always see a big spread there. And then we have a really good split between the general contractor respondents and the subcontractor respondents to kind of give us, who are we looking at here when we talk about this. Frederick, did you have anything you wanted to say before I started to jump into some of these stats?
No, it's always interesting to see the mix of the surveys and the statement you made about, most of the respondents are, in smaller businesses, and I think it's just the nature of the industry. Like on the GC side, when you look at the ENR 400, right, number 400 on the list was, I think, 201 million last year in revenue, which is, many people say, well, it's a big business, but it's not really that big of a business, right? I mean, a lot of the money is passed through money when you have roughly 28,000 GCs. So it means that you've got 27,600 GCs under 200 million. So it's a very fragmented industry. And with 50 employees, I mean, we have many clients that 50 employees are doing 100 million in annual revenue on the GC side. So yeah, it totally makes sense. I think your demographics are actually pretty reflective of what the industry looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I would agree. And we've noticed the same thing with the fragmentation of the industry. And I think that compounds some of those communication and collaboration aspects that are the underlying root or kind of the foundation of some of these problems, is that there are just so many people with so many different processes doing one, element of a very big project. It's very ripe for, problems with communication and then problems with payment, especially considering, when you're on the job site, you can't paint the wall until the drywall guy comes.
Right.
But when you're in the back office, you're not necessarily communicating with all the other back offices like the people on the job site who can manage the completion of the project. So there's a lot of dissonance there as well.
Well, yeah, and when you're on the smaller side, right? I mean, you wear multiple hats. It's not that uncommon, especially smaller subs. If you're a subcontractor, you want to get work, you want to get busy, you want to get paid, right? Oftentimes you want to get paid. It's an oh shit moment on Thursday afternoon, going, okay, I got payroll tomorrow. I got to make sure payments coming from my GCs, and I think products like LevelSet help streamline that process.
Definitely. And we always like to say, nobody likes filing liens. General contractors don't like them. Subs don't like to have to file them. Suppliers don't like to have to file them. And it happens. It happens because of this communication breakdown. So the more we can do to help it, the better. So since this report isn't completely done yet, we don't have it all together, I'm just going to kind of give a preview on some of our key findings that have come up so far. And you'll have to tune back in or head over to LevelSet, or maybe Red Team will send it out to get the full downloadable report or infographic or whatever it spins up into, kind of like an industry snapshot of some sort.
So I guess we could claim this is breaking news, right? We're getting the early.
You guys are the first people to hear about this. Actually, no joke. Unless you work at LevelSet, you haven't seen any of this stuff. So this is breaking news for you guys.
Awesome.
I'm on a podcast later with one other company and another webinar tomorrow with yet another person. So you guys are literally the first.
All right, sweet.
So yeah, the first thing we noticed is this interesting gap between the GCs and the subs. And I think it's pretty obvious to some extent, but it's still interesting to see it reflected. These general contractors are 50% more likely to be satisfied with payment speed, and 2 times as many GCs report fast payment speed compared to subs. So this makes a lot of sense. The money isn't traveling as far. There's less stuff. The project is this much done. The owner can tell. They're able to release those payments. So of course the GCs are kind of, in a way, I don't want to say it this way exactly, but like sitting pretty. Like they don't need to wait and worry about the next steps or how they're going to fund their next project, because it's just coming a little bit faster. And twice as many GCs compared to subs are reporting payment within 30 days. So if we have 100 GCs reporting it in 30 days, like that's great. And you have all these subs kind of still waiting much more than 30 days. I think we've actually seen a better payment speed than we have in the past in this last report. I don't want to say for certain because we aren't fully worked through on all the data, and there's a lot of it. But it's actually, we've seen a spike in lien filings, but also an increase in payment speed. I think there's more willingness to file liens right now, but there's also more willingness to avoid liens by dispersing those payments when they know that they're due, because there's a lot of pressure to get it out. And there's also a lot of pressure to hold cash. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Also, they know now that you'll tell on them.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we don't really like to think about it that way. But yeah, I mean, in a respect, like for sure, there's a lot more fear of not being paid, and thus more fear of liens being filed on projects. So I think, the payment speed is coming up a little bit right now, and potentially is even inflated based on, coronavirus. So next thing, this is just continuing on that same idea. This is one really interesting. We've always seen, a lot of fear around charging for late fees, or charging interest, or trying to get a deposit. And that was very true, especially in surveys we've run where we've had a lot more subcontractors. And this one, we've had a really even split between the GC and the sub. And we're able to really see that these GCs they're not afraid to charge upfront payments. They're not afraid to charge late fees, and they're not afraid to protect their lien rights. It's great. And it, again, like kind of makes sense to the extent that the relationship between the GC and the sub is sacred. The sub wants to have a really good relationship with the GC so that they get hired again, and the GC wants to have good relationships with their subs so they can work with the best people. The GCs, maybe, they could be more concerned with the owner, but to some extent, I think that they have a little bit more power over being able to request certain things. But again, like I'd be interested on your take here, Frederick.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, we've talked about this internally often, right? And there's a balancing act for a GC, right? I think there's a lot of factors. There's you mentioned it, kind of that ripple effect, right? So, the time that the GC has enough documentation to request payment from the owner, there's a certain amount of time that it takes, right? Obviously, with products like Red Team and LevelSet, we try to shorten that time frame and make it more efficient. But then for the subcontractor, that's compounded with the additional time that now it takes to approve that invoice, right? What we find historically is, I think GCs, I hate to use the word better, but there's an expectation that is set with the owner that's, I think, a little bit tighter than with the sub in terms of the process for how a payment is requested, and the obligation that the owner has to make payment during a certain timeline. I mean, there are certain obligations that are reciprocal, that are very clear. And there are some contractual obligations that exist with the GC, but I think the GC have, quite frankly, a bigger lever. And so for the subs, if the owner delays things a little bit, right, it's compounded for the sub. So it's not uncommon that from the time the work is done as a subcontractor, you may be 60 days out from the time you actually get paid for the work you've done. And so you're kind of banking the project. So that finding the right balance is really important for the GC ultimately, who is kind of the hub, right, of receiving that money and deploying that capital throughout the project to keep everybody moving along.
Yeah, absolutely. The interplay between the relationships and the relationship of time and how the project needs to get done, it's really it's a lot to try and understand why these things happen. It's a major reason why we go and do these reports, is to try and like peel back the onion just a little bit more every time, and kind of poke and prod and probe to see what actually might be going on here between the different parties and the relationships.
Right.
Cool. So the kind of last little thing I'll shine a light on here is the payment speed gap between a few states. So since we had a lot of data on these 3 states, it's pretty interesting. One thing I love this stat. It's not very mind-boggling, but it's really interesting to me. So Texas has the most intense paperwork requirements of any state. So anyone listening to this, if you work in Texas, you know what's going on. You're sending your monthly notices in the middle of the month. You're trying to figure out, how to keep track of all this stuff, or you're a GC, you're receiving all these notices on your project. You're trying to get waivers. There's all these timelines. So of course, Texas is the least satisfied with their payment speed. It takes longer to get paid. And overall, it's just like a kind of a little bit of a mess. So the disparity between the states isn't huge, but it's great to see, that, to me, that kind of proves a point, which is when the paperwork compliance is more complicated, and it's actually the most complicated in these 3 states, Texas more so than the others. When that paperwork requirement becomes more difficult or more cumbersome, payment speed and happiness with payment goes down. I always think that's really interesting.
Would you say that I guess that's the way I think about satisfaction is always relative to expectation, right? And
yes.
and so maybe like you look at Texas, it takes longer to get paid, but ultimately they're less dissatisfied. I mean, still dissatisfied. But like, how do you see that, like that expectation management, which is not just the contract, but I think it's really, like we've seen GCs really have very, very clear and very, I'd say, transparent, more than clear policies and processes, so that the subs really understand this, and this is what I need to get paid. And I know that if I do this, I'm absolutely going to get paid within so many days of them having everything. And I can take that to the bank, no pun intended, that's going to happen. And we found that transparency of the process shared with the subcontractor is important. That's why we built Team Player.
Yes.
What we found is the actual setting up to an invoice that's agreed upon itself. Does it meet the schedule of value? Is it consistent compared to the last schedule of value? Is it the right retainage? Just the math of it in itself sometimes becomes a significant exercise. And when you add to this change orders and field change orders and directives, and all of a sudden the sub is charging you for, hey, you maybe do extra cleanup that day, and so I'm going to charge you for it.
Yeah,
the GC,
COVID procedures.
Right. So there's a lot there. So having very transparent, very well established and clear processes and expectation tends to lower the level of dissatisfaction, because they go, yeah, I'm not happy, but I also know that I'm partly responsible for causing those delays. Because oftentimes what we have found in our conversations with GCs and subs is that there is a little bit of both.
Yeah, I would agree that there's that expectation versus satisfaction is interrelated, and it's actually made a lot of our surveys in the past kind of confusing. There's a cognitive dissonance in the industry around what they think is acceptable versus what is actually legally required by prompt payment statutes or lien rights protection. There are people that say, I forget what the stats were. I should have put them on this, but it's the last report. You can download it and check it out, where, the majority of people are satisfied with payment speeds, but also the majority of people are waiting more than 60 days to get paid. So I guess that their expectations are, hey, it takes a while. There's this status quo that, when you do your work, you got to wait a while to get paid. And I don't think it necessarily needs to be that way. I think that there will always be slower payment in this industry than many others, but I don't think it has to be so long that you lose your right to get paid, where your lien rights passed, and a GC has an option to not pay you and create a legal situation.
Right.
Obviously nobody wants that, and everybody wants to have good relationships, but at the end of the day, we still have more than 2/3 of the people in these surveys, so 66% in all 3 of these states, spending more than 5 hours a week chasing payments. So, again, like this cognitive dissonance, like the payment speed is up a little bit. We're seeing people talking about being satisfied. More than half of the people are satisfied with payment speed, but way more than half are spending more than 5 hours chasing payments. So we have this kind of weird thing going on here.
So let me ask you this, because I think it's an interesting, like chasing payment means a lot of things potentially, right? Sometimes it's actually, hey, I know they have everything they need and they're just not paying me. Sometimes chasing payment is, hey, they're making me redo my documentation. They're making me produce new credentials. I need to get a new certificate of insurance. And they count all that time as delays. That's the responsibility of the GC, and sometimes it isn't. The GC is like, listen, part of your agreement is you have to have, the proper type of coverage, and you need to prove it, and you have right. And so, because I had that conversation with a sub not so long ago, and I was like, okay, so you're saying it takes a long time for you to get paid, and he was really, hard. I guess there was just a recent one, so he had some heartburn, like that. He was still angry about it. He was coming right through the screen, which was in a way interesting to watch. And so, and I asked him the question. I go, okay, so was it that everything was 100% done, and you were just waiting for the check, or did it take a long time to get to the point where you knew everything was 100% done and you were entitled to get the check according to the terms of the agreement? And he paused, and his first kind of knee jerk was, well, that's not the point. And then as soon as he said it, he kind of caught himself. He goes, well, that is actually the point. Yeah. So, and then when he rethought about it, he goes, well, in reality, the delay, that was actually the GC's responsibility was this, when the overall delay was that. And the cause of that extension was not just the GC, was, they were communicating via email, and they didn't have a centralized data point. So they would call the GC and say, hey, can you tell me what else you need? And then so the voicemail comes in, they're waiting for a call back, they get the call back, they miss a phone call, someone leaves a voicemail, they have to listen to the voicemail. And there was all this work, and I was like, how much did it cost you? And when we actually quantified the cost of that one invoice for them was $175 of time that he put into it, that he could have done something better with. And so
definitely,
sometimes we think of that chasing payment as the time from which I believe I'm owed and the time I get paid. And sometimes it's the time really from where you've done everything to validate you're owed the money to when you get paid is really the delay. That's the GC potentially, I guess, controls would be.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that fair?
Absolutely. I think that there's, it's one of these other like cognitive dissonances that happens between the parties, where it's like facts and feelings. And because getting paid for your work is a very emotional thing, like your feelings can overwhelm the facts. And when you put that kind of like a heuristic around like facts and feelings over the complexity that's required to manage payment, and the lack of really simple ways to go and handle a pay app with all the supporting documentation, with the signed correct lien waivers for your state, maybe it needs to be notarized, it needs to be sent by a certain time to get into a pay cycle. I think things get conflated. I think people think that they're owed, even though they didn't, necessarily submit the payment application correctly. I think that's very, very common. And people think about chasing payment. I think some people even think about chasing payments when they're, writing the invoice. So like, I'm invoicing this person. This is me chasing the payment.
Right.
They should have just, paid me when I started. So, that is that, as far as that question goes in our survey, it's a little vague. But again, like somewhat by design, because the facts and the feelings of, how you categorize it yourself, like it's very hard to ask a question that would get to the root of the problem.
It could be interesting though. It could be interesting to ask the emotional question first and make it a locked answer, and then have follow-up questions that force them to really think through, was it really a fact or was it really how I felt? And that might actually say, well, now that we've answered those questions, does that change how you feel about it now that you've kind of thought through this process? Because I know we find that. And we've all seen that experience, right? Well, I felt like, this happened, and in reality, when you actually dissect what really happened, the feelings were not always aligned with the truth. To your point, I think that's really important. And construction is so tightly related to the quality of the relationship between the different
Yes.
parties, that managing the emotion aspect of it is pretty critical, especially because the industry is fairly small, so the business gets pretty small, and typically, the guy you need to pay, he's got to make his mortgage payment with it. I mean, it's not like it's an abstract thing. There's payroll for the direct employees are typically our close friends. I mean, it's tough, and so that's why I love what you guys do as a company in that focus, right? And I think we try to extend some of the work you do, and you extend the work we do, right? And I think that's why that integration is so meaningful and actually very used by our customer, because of the value it creates, and the importance of removing as much of the emotional component of that process as possible, so that you just focus on, okay, let's do what needs to be done, let's do the right thing, and then everything's going to work the way it's supposed to work according to the process and the expectation we set between us, right?
Right. Yeah. And another thing like related to that, it's exactly right. Like I couldn't agree with you more is, not only does it remove the emotion, it removes the stress. And like this paperwork is stressful. And when you're stressed, like your emotions like get overdialed, you start going crazy. Like you said, that guy was coming through the screen, and this happens all the time. You talk to people on our customer success team or our support team, people come to us with just so much stress and so much emotion because they don't know what to do. It's too complicated. And like you said, like they have to make a mortgage payment. In our past reports, you said, how does this, deficit in cash flow or slow payments, what does it affect? And like you said, payroll was like number one. Like they can't pay their guys, they're going to lose their guys. They're not going to be able to, like the trickle down of not having a quality cash flow and managing these really important relationships, either within your company or with your customers, is paramount. And you can't do that unless that emotional element of not getting paid is removed or mitigated to the extent where like people just feel like everything's going smoothly.
Right.
So that's our preview of the data. If we can keep talking about it a little bit if you want, or whatever you want to do there. But
no, yeah. I think listen, I think this is really valuable information. I think as software companies, technology companies, we often spend a lot of time talking about the buttons, what does it do and how does it work, and let the customers kind of figure out the value that creates for them. I believe that what you guys have done as an organization is you've tapped into, well, what does that mean to you as an individual, right? And so I think the points you touched on, the stress factors, the impact of the relationship are paramount to successful construction projects. And when we think about what we all do as construction technology companies, is not just saying, well, I'm going to help the sub, I'm going to help the GC. I think at the end of the day, what we do is we help the project. And by helping the project, everybody wins. I mean, that's usually the way it lands. And so helping payment, not payment, not just payment, but helping the flow of cash through the project as seamlessly as it can be, as transparently as it can be, as predictably as it can be. Ultimately, everybody wins. And so, like, I see owners obviously now put more and more requirements and say, listen, I need to know, Mr. GC, how are you going to manage that money once I set it to you? I want to make sure you're going to pay the subs on time. I want to make sure I know how you track your liens and that kind of stuff. And those are things that we see and we hear about all the time. So, I would say, at the risk of offending some other partners, but LevelSet is definitely one of our favorite integrations, because pragmatically it has such a deep impact on what people have to deal with day to day, the amount of time spent managing that process, which ultimately doesn't make them a dime, right? You don't make money there. You just collect what you've already earned by doing the work, and so the more you can simplify this process, and maybe that's an overstatement, simplifying, but the more streamlining you can do, I think the better chance they have to do more work and earn more, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that is the name of the game.
Yeah, definitely. And I can say the same thing about Red Team. It's awesome partnering with you guys, especially a lot of our partners are, more in like the sub tier realm, and getting to partner with people who focus a lot more on the GC side is great because, it's like you said, it's all about how can we streamline this. And when both parties are using this to exchange waivers and have all the paperwork moving through the same process, everything just starts to work a little better. That collaboration works, and the communication starts to kick off, and all the little boxes for all the things you need to do get checked off in the same place, and payment can flow smoothly, and people get paid, and then you avoid those payment fires, and that's what we're all about.
Well, Alex, thank you again. Thank you for giving us the first preview of this.
I didn't even think about that, but it's great. I'm glad to do it.
We're excited to share this with all of our clients, because I think, again, it's an important conversation. I think we touched on a lot of key emotional factors, right, that impact the overall flow of the project and the overall performance of the project. So thank you for your time, and for all of our Red Team users, people looking at Red Team or looking to continue to improve their construction platforms and finding ways to be more efficient. Definitely would welcome you to take a look at Red Team, but also take a look at LEVELSET, because I think there's definitely an impact that these companies create together that's really meaningful for construction.
Absolutely, and thank you guys for having us. We love to chat with partners. We love to talk about payments. So it's our pleasure to be here, and we really appreciate you having us on.
Cool. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you as well. Bye-bye.